7 years ago, I was thrown out of my own home by the very people who gave me the fino explanation, no look of compassion, just the cold certainty in their eyes that I was guilty. Guilty of a lie my younger sister made up. A horrific accusation that turned me, the once beloved eldest daughter, into a monster in the eyes of my entire family. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need proof. They tossed my belongings onto the lawn like garbage and tore my youth apart as if it had never existed. I slept in my car. I went days without eating. And once, I stood on a bridge in the pouring rain, ready to end everything. My phone was silent. No one searched for me. No one asked if I was still alive. My family let me rot in the dark all because of a lie. Now, all these years later, they've come back. Shaky voices on the phone saying, "We're about to lose the house. Can you help us?" But I didn't save them. I let them lose everything. Because some lessons can only be learned when you've hit the bottom. And the truth they once refused to face is now teaching them in a way no one can escape. Before we dive into the full story, would you mind telling me where in the world you're watching from? I'd really love to know how far my story will travel. I grew up in a picture-perfect family in the quiet suburbs of northern Illinois, a place where the houses all looked the same, American flags waved from porches, and neighbors smiled at you every Saturday morning. To outsiders, we were the definition of ideal. My father was a successful financial advisor. My mother, a part-time real estate agent, spent the rest of her time cultivating the image of the perfect American mom. I, the eldest daughter, was their pride and joy. Born right on schedule, I was never a troublemaker. I was the straight-A student, the literature award winner, the varsity volleyball player, the girl who always did the right thing. I wasn't stunning like the girls on Instagram, but I had what my mother once called discipline and backbone. Whenever guests came over, she paraded me like a trophy. My daughter teaches herself and still tops her class. Almost. But that title of the perfect child came with something no one else could see, the crushing pressure to always be right. In our house, mistakes were not allowed. A single B+, a single act of defiance, and my mother would go cold for a week. My father would say just one thing: "You've embarrassed this family." We didn't live for love. We lived for appearances. We were the Christmas card with a filter. The laughter at dinner parties masking the silence that filled our home once the door closed. When I was 12, they adopted Lily, a white girl with golden hair and glassy blue eyes, like a porcelain doll. My mother said it had always been her dream to have a daughter who was sweet and angelic. All attention immediately shifted to Lily. Our family began orbiting around her like a new sun. I tried to be a good sister. I taught Lily how to braid her hair, walked her to school. But gradually, I saw the truth. I was the one burdened with expectations. Lily was the one who got to be loved. She made mistakes, she was forgiven. She cried, she was comforted. As for me, I only existed when my accomplishments were bright enough to justify my presence. Every time my mother showed Lily off in a princess dress or posted her childish doodles on Facebook with captions like "My little angel," I didn't feel jealous. I felt hollow. As if the moment Lily appeared, I had quietly faded from the picture I once stood in the center of. And I thought, I could live with that, as long as they still believed I was good. But it turns out, their trust in me was so fragile, one lie was enough to shatter it. It was a Tuesday in mid-October. The air had turned crisp, and fallen leaves scattered across campus lawns. I had just finished a grueling major exam, my head was spinning, but I felt relieved. The final hurdle of senior year was behind me. I planned to grab a cinnamon latte from my usual cafe and head back to my apartment to work on my last term paper. But when I checked my phone, my screen lit up with 27 missed calls and nearly 40 unread texts. Every name was familiar. Mom, Dad, Aunt Linda, Uncle Mark, even old friends from high school. The messages were filled with words like, "You're disgusting. Don't ever come back. I can't believe you'd do that. Oh." I stood frozen in the parking lot, unable to make sense of anything. My heart pounded, my hands trembled as I dialed home. My mother answered. Her voice cut through me like an icy blade. I don't want to hear a single excuse. You're filth. I can't believe I gave birth to you. Then she hung up. I drove home in a daze, my mind thick with confusion. As soon as I pulled up in front of the house, the front door burst open. My father stormed out, eyes bloodshot, fists clenched. Without a word, he slapped me across the face so hard, I stumbled, crashing into the lawn. Blood welled at the corner of my mouth, the taste of iron flooding in. I looked up in panic. My mother stood behind him, holding a trash bag stuffed with my clothes. Her eyes burned with hatred, as if she were staring at a murderer. Get out of my house! Get lost, she screamed. I struggled to get up, my head buzzing, my face stinging, my lips split and bleeding. What's going on? I don't understand. What did I do? I stammered helplessly. Lily sat on the living room couch, face buried in Grandma's shoulder, tears and snot streaming down her face. She sobbed like she had just escaped hell. She said she'd kill me if I told. She said no one would believe me. She's been doing it since I was 10. The room exploded. They screamed. Accused, cursed, threatened. I tried to shout, "It's not true. I never did anything," but no one listened. They didn't want proof. They didn't want the truth. They just needed someone to hate. And I was the most convenient target. My mother threw the bag of clothes at me. My father ripped the wallet from my hands and pulled out every bank card, insurance document, and ID. From this moment on, you are no longer our daughter, he said, each word like a nail driven into my chest. I stumbled backward from the doorway. The front lawn was soft and cold, wet with mud and the blood from my mouth. Lights flickered on in the neighbors' windows. Shadows moved behind curtains. People watched. I heard the click of a camera, whispering voices. I used to believe this was a friendly neighborhood. Now I knew they were witnesses to a quiet execution, a daughter hanged by her own family with nothing but their eyes and assumptions. No one asked if it was true. No one asked if I needed help. All they wanted was a story to gossip about, a monster to cheer at as it was torn apart. And that night, I was officially cast out of my own life. Because of a lie. From that day forward, I was no longer me. In just one afternoon, my entire world collapsed like a sandcastle in a rising tide. The joint bank account with my father was locked. The tuition payment for my final semester never came through like it used to. The credit card I used to buy textbooks was now just a useless piece of plastic. When I went to the school's financial office to ask what happened, the woman looked at me like I was a scammer. Your sponsorship account has been completely withdrawn. There's no one left listed as your guarantor. I asked for an emergency loan. Denied. I inquired about scholarships. She shook her head. I left that office with one sentence echoing in my head. They really cut me off. Oh. My volleyball coach, the one who used to pat my back and call me the unofficial captain, suddenly turned cold. For now, it's best if you stop competing. We have to protect the team's reputation. Not a single teammate spoke up. No one asked if I was okay. I tried to keep attending classes, but I had no money for materials, no place to sleep, no safe space to rest. I lived in the equipment storage room behind the gym. It was a tiny space that reeked of old sweat and rubber, but it had a roof. I snuck showers in the locker room, washed my clothes in a bathroom sink, and dried them with the hand dryer. One day, a classmate 2 rows away said loudly enough for the entire room to hear, "I'm not sitting near that girl. I heard she did something sick to her sister." All heads turned toward me. A few people pulled out their phones and started taking pictures. I got up and left the room without a word. That was the last time I ever stepped foot in a classroom. My student ID still had a few leftover dollars for the campus cafeteria, just enough to eat one meal a day, usually a cold sandwich or a thin soup that barely warmed me. I didn't feel hunger the way people normally do. My hunger was a slow erosion. It blurred my memory, dulled my emotions, and replaced everything with a heavy, silent void, as if I was dissolving bit by bit. I once believed that if I stayed quiet, kept pushing forward, everything would eventually be okay. That my parents would realize their mistake. That Lily would confess. But no. What I got was 3 full years, without a single call. Not one message, not one apology. My phone, the only thing I had left after being exiled from my family, stayed completely silent. And then came the night of rain. Wind slashed my face like blades. I stood on the bridge, hands gripping the railing, legs shaking from the cold, my mind unraveling. Beneath me, the river was black as ink. I opened my phone. No texts, no missed calls. I tapped on Mom in my contacts. The screen lit up with one line. "This number is no longer in service." I laughed. A twisted, strangled laugh that caught in my throat, half mocking, half mad with despair. I used to believe that if I was good enough, if I did everything right, then no one could ever abandon me. But I was wrong. In this world, sometimes a beautiful lie weighs more than a lifetime of honesty. And if I had jumped that night, I don't think anyone would have noticed. A student disappears in the rain, a body drifting downstream, a short blurb in the local paper. That would have been it. No funeral. No tears. No one would have truly remembered me, because no one had ever truly seen me. I don't remember how long I stood on that bridge. The rain soaked through my thin hoodie. Wind lashed my face, so cold I could no longer tell where my skin ended and the air began. All that remained was a single thought echoing over and over in my mind. No one needs me. No one believes me. No one will cry if I disappear. I gripped the railing, my foot resting on the icy edge of the concrete. Below, the river was pitch black, whispering to me, "Just let go, it'll all be over." Bit cold for a swim, isn't it, young lady? That voice cut through the air behind me, soft as a breeze but clear as a bell in the midnight quiet. I startled, almost slipping, catching myself on the rail just in time. I turned and saw an older man standing a few feet away. He wore a worn-out military jacket and held a rusty fishing rod. His face was weathered by time, solid and calm, as if this were just another peaceful evening walk after dinner. "I'm sorry," I stammered. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I'll leave." "No," he said, taking a step closer, stopping just a few feet from me, his eyes fixed gently on my face. "If I walk away now, it means I'm letting it happen. And in war, turning away means your brother dies." I stood frozen. His words weren't comforting, they weren't forceful, they were something else entirely, like a rope catching me just as I was falling into the void. "I'm not anyone you know," I whispered. "You don't owe me anything." He shook his head slowly but firmly. Everyone stood at the edge at least once. The question is, did someone choose to stand there with them? I don't remember how he managed to lead me back to his house. Maybe I was too exhausted. Maybe, deep down, there was still a sliver of me that wanted to be saved. Frank's house was small but meticulously neat. Every pair of shoes lined up perfectly. The books on the shelves were aligned with precision. He led me to the bathroom and handed me a soft cotton outfit that had once belonged to someone. My son's. He died in Afghanistan, but he wouldn't mind. After I showered, I sat at the kitchen table, hair still dripping, wearing the oversized t-shirt like a blanket around me. Frank placed a bowl of warm soup in front of me, with a slice of peanut butter toast on the side. The smell rose up simple, but strangely comforting. I ate like someone who had never truly known what hunger was. He didn't ask, he didn't speak. He just sat there, quietly present, as if his being there was the answer to every ache I carried inside. And then I began to tell my story. Bit by bit. From the evening I was thrown out of my home, to the first night I slept in the equipment room, to the night I stood on that bridge thinking it would be my last. I didn't cry. I just spoke, as if scraping my fingernails across a wound that had long since festered. Frank didn't interrupt. No clucking of tongues, no cutting in, no false sympathy. He simply listened, quiet and steady, like a night watchman holding vigil. That night, he laid out a thin mattress on the couch for me, handed me an old wool blanket that still smelled faintly of soap. I lay down, turned my face to the wall, feeling utterly hollow. But in that hollowness was something I hadn't felt in over 3 years, a sense of safety. Not happiness, not forgiveness, just the absence of fear. For once, I didn't have to brace for the next blow. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I slept. Truly slept. No nightmares, no jolting awake in the middle of the night, no muffled crying into a pillow. Just the sleep of someone who was finally allowed to surrender without being trampled again. The next morning, Frank woke me at 5 with a light but deliberate knock on the door. It wasn't a command, it was a rhythm that carried a quiet message. Welcome back to the land of the living. I stepped into the living room, my eyes still heavy, and found him already dressed in workout clothes. A cup of coffee sat on the table with a single instruction: drink it, then run. That first morning came without pity, without probing questions. Just a dirt trail through the woods, a pair of sneakers he'd given me the day before, and the steady sound of his footsteps beside mine. I was breathless, my heart pounding, legs about to give out. Frank just kept walking slow, steady, never pushing, never mocking. Every time I tried to stop, he sighed and said, "I thought you wanted to live." By the second week, I started working for him, a simple role at a private security firm he co-founded with a few other veterans. At first, it was just basic tasks: cleaning, training weapons, organizing files, checking camera feeds, labeling gear. But Frank never let me do anything on autopilot. Stand up straight. Who's going to trust you to protect them if you look like you want to disappear? Say that line to a client and they'll run to another company. He didn't train me like a boss trains an employee. He forged me like a soldier clawing their way back from hell, forcing me to relearn how to exist among people without flinching. I learned how to hold eye contact, how to speak clearly, how to keep my chin up and walk with intent, how not to apologize for simply existing. At the same time, Frank insisted I meet someone, a former Marine turned therapist, a friend of his who specialized in PTSD. I refused. I said I was fine. I said I just needed a job. But he didn't back down. He said one thing that stopped me cold. No one walks away from the battlefield with their mind untouched, and your family turned your home into a battlefield. In my first therapy session, I sat in silence. But little by little, that therapist led me to confront the very things I had spent years avoiding: the guilt of not being able to prove my innocence, the shame of being betrayed and not even having the strength to be angry, and the paralyzing fear that anyone, at any moment, could turn their back on me without warning. 3 months passed, and I began to change. I woke up early each day, trained consistently, ate full meals, stopped drinking, and no longer cried myself to sleep at night. My body, once gaunt and hollow, regained muscle, sharpness, and calm presence. But the biggest change wasn't physical. It was in my eyes, in the reflection I finally saw in the mirror. For the first time, I could look at myself without disgust. One afternoon, while I was cleaning a mock training rifle, Frank stepped in. He stood there for a moment, then said, "You survived something most people don't make it through. But surviving isn't enough. You have to live." I looked at him, the cloth still in my hand. He stepped closer and placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "Build a life no one can take from you. Not by asking permission, but by choosing it." I used to believe I was disposable. But from that moment on, I understood I was no longer the victim of a lie. I was the woman rising from her own ashes. And this time, I would never let anyone, not even family, define my worth again. I met Alex, who would later become my husband, in an early autumn afternoon at a contemporary art exhibition where Frank's security company had been hired to manage safety. By then, I'd been working nearly 3 months, used to the discipline, used to the silent, hollow calm that lived inside me. Frank simply said, "My nephew will be there. He's handling logistics for the event. Just coordinate with him." I nodded, assuming he'd be another entitled, well-dressed rich kid with a smug grin. And when I saw Alex for the first time, I was even more convinced I was right. Neatly combed blonde hair, sleeves rolled on a crisp white shirt, a deep voice with a cool, measured tone. He didn't look at me like a colleague. He looked at me the way someone studies a layout, identifying me as a security asset, present, quiet, and out of the way. I didn't need his attention anyway. I arrived early, checked the emergency exits, scanned the temporary camera feeds, and maintained a respectful distance. But then I overheard him talking to an elderly guest. The man was sneering at a piece of art, dismissing it as soulless, trash. Alex smiled slightly and replied, "Maybe it was created by a soul no one listens to anymore." I froze. Not because of the words themselves, but because I knew exactly how that felt. We started talking after the exhibit. A few polite exchanges. Then a spontaneous coffee. Then one evening, he offered me a ride when it began to rain and I had forgotten my jacket. Alex didn't talk much, but whenever I spoke, he really listened, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to hide any part of myself. He didn't know about my past. I hadn't told him. I was afraid. Afraid that if he knew, everything would collapse again, just like before. But 6 months later, when we were officially dating, when his hand held mine as if it had always belonged there, I knew I couldn't keep it hidden any longer. One evening, I invited him over. We had dinner, listened to soft jazz, bathed in the glow of warm yellow lights. I sat on the sofa, looked into his eyes, and said, "There's something I need to tell you. Something that might change the way you see me." And I told him. Every detail. I left nothing out. From the accusation to my father's slap, from the nights curled up in the sports equipment room to the time I stood on the bridge, ready to end it all. I told it in a steady voice, as if I were recounting someone else's story. But my hands were ice cold, and my heart was pounding so hard it felt like I couldn't breathe. When I finished, I couldn't look at him. I braced myself for silence. For the retreat. For that familiar shadow of doubt. But instead, Alex stepped forward and knelt in front of me. He didn't say, "I'm so sorry." He didn't say, "I don't know what to say." He simply said 3 words, "I believe you." I broke. Completely. The tears I thought had dried up years ago spilled down my face, soaking my trembling hands. I cried like a child, like someone finally allowed to let go of a burden they'd carried for half their life. And Alex just held me. He didn't ask questions. He didn't make any grand promises. He was simply there. Steady, quiet. And sometimes, love doesn't need to be explained. Sometimes it just takes one person brave enough to believe in you when the entire world once chose to turn away. We held our wedding on a gentle spring day in a small garden just outside the city where the sun wasn't too harsh, the breeze was just cool enough, and everything unfolded exactly the way I had once secretly wished. Not extravagant, not flashy. Just those who truly loved me gathered close. Frank wore a charcoal gray suit and stood beside me at the entrance to the aisle. His hand trembling slightly, but his eyes firm. As the music began to play, he said nothing except one simple sentence. "Your real father couldn't do this, so I will." I nodded. My heart was racing so hard I thought I might collapse, but when I linked my arm with Frank's, I felt an unexpected safety. We walked between 2 rows of chairs filled with people I had chosen, colleagues, staff, real friends, people who had seen me at my lowest and stayed. Alex stood at the front, wearing a plain black suit, his gaze never once leaving me. And when I reached him, he smiled with the gentlest expression I had ever seen in my life. There were no grand flourishes, no dramatic vows. But in the way he held my hand, I knew I was no longer alone. After the wedding, I officially became a co-founder in the company's expansion alongside Frank. We opened new branches in 3 other states, secured contracts for major events, high-profile corporations, and clients who demanded nothing short of absolute trust. I took charge of recruiting and training those society had cast aside, people like I once was, those who had fallen, who had failed, but never gave up. And then, one day, after I began noticing a subtle shift in my body, a lingering fatigue, and a strange, inexplicable intuition, I held a pregnancy test in my hand and knew I was going to be a mother. I sat alone in a sunlit bedroom, holding the faint ultrasound image of a tiny growing dot. A life, a heartbeat, a beginning. I placed one hand on my stomach, the other clutching the picture, and the tears came without restraint. Not from fear, but because, for the first time in my life, I felt something whole. This was life, not life that had to be fought for, survived, or endured, but life that was allowed to bloom, to be nurtured with love without conditions. I bowed my head, whispering to the child I knew couldn't yet hear or understand. My love, I will protect you. No one will ever take you from me. Not like they did to me. And in that moment, I was no longer just someone bearing wounds. I was someone who would never let those wounds repeat. I was a mother. A woman standing strong not just for herself but for a future beating steadily within her. It was a Wednesday morning like any other. I was seated in my new office, a cozy upper-floor space overlooking the busy street below, sunlight pouring through the curtains and shining across my desk where a file sat, detailing the upcoming security project in New Jersey. One hand typed out an email, the other held a mug of ginger tea Sophie had made that morning. Everything felt strangely peaceful. Then the landline rang. Anna. My assistant peeked in through the doorway. There's a strange call, no name left. The person just said, "She's your mother." I froze. My entire body stiffened in a single breath. My throat went dry. My hand gripped the mug so tightly that pain bloomed across my palm. I picked up the phone. Hello? A soft, trembling breath. Then a voice I knew too well, a voice that had haunted my worst, most bitter dreams. Anna, it's Mom. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch out. Then I replied, my voice calm and flat as still water. Oh, so you remember now that you have a daughter named Anna? My mother choked on her words. I could hear the quickening of her breath, like she was on the edge of breaking, like one more word from me would shatter her completely. Lily, she finally told us. Everything was a lie. She admitted. She made it all up. I'm sorry. We didn't know. We were wrong. All of us. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes. I wasn't surprised. There wasn't a flicker of shock or relief. I had known for years. The only thing I hadn't expected was that they would call now. I said nothing. On the other end, my mother continued. Your father, he's full of regret too. We've lost nearly everything. The business failed. The bank is about to seize the house. Lily. She dropped out of school. She's working part-time at a convenience store now. We need help. Can you? I laughed. A dry, hollow laugh, no longer bitter, just tired. Tired of hearing the same script in a different costume. Help? I repeated. After 7 years of silence, 7 years without a single call, a single message, a single word. You think I'm still your daughter? We're family, sweetheart. I laughed again, this time softer. As if even I found it ridiculous. Family? You don't remember? Family was the first to call me disgusting. Family was the one who split my lip open with a slap and threw my bags onto the lawn. Family was the place that stayed silent while I slept outside, hungry, stripped of even the identity to call my own. My mother was crying. I could hear it. But not a single tear reached me. I spoke slowly, every word sharp. If today I were still that broken girl, sleeping under a bridge, would you be calling? If I weren't successful, didn't have an office, a home, something you could take pride in, would you be here? No answer. I already knew I was right. My voice dropped lower, colder than steel. You don't need me, you need a lifeline, and I'm sorry, but I'm no longer drowning in your flood. I set the receiver down before she could say another word. My hand relaxed for the first time in minutes. My heart didn't tremble. There was only one clear feeling. Peace is knowing you're strong enough not to prove anything anymore. And I knew that call wasn't a reconnection. It was closure. The end of a chapter I no longer belonged to. I chose a quiet cafe tucked behind a row of maple trees at the end of the street, a place with soft amber lights, large windows overlooking the park, and tables spaced far enough apart that no one could overhear your story. I didn't want noise, I just wanted closure. I arrived early. Frank sat across from me, the kind of protector who didn't need to speak to make his presence felt, always ready to stand if needed. Alex was by my side, his hand never once leaving mine, his gaze guarding me more fiercely than any words ever could. At exactly 2 o'clock, they walked in. My mother looked 10 years older, thin, quiet, her eyes foggy like mist. My father no longer resembled the powerful man I remembered. His shirt was worn, his shoulders slumped, his eyes barely met mine. And Lily, she was the last to enter. Smaller than I remembered, walking timidly, like a child still trying to find her way home. I didn't stand. Just nodded, coldly. No one spoke at first. No one knew where to begin. Until I finally broke the silence. Well, say what you came to say. I don't have all day. My father raised his head, stammering, Anna, we were wrong. And I don't want to hear apologies if they're only being said because you've lost everything. I cut in. I want the truth. From each of you. Lily was the first to speak, her voice trembling, not the voice of someone shifting blame, but of someone who had carried guilt too long. I was jealous. I just wanted Mom and Dad to love me like they loved you. They always talked about you like you were perfect. I felt like a shadow. And when I lied, I didn't think it would go that far. I just wanted them to see me, to care, to believe me. I looked at her. She was crying not because she'd been caught, but because she'd lived with the weight of her mistake too long, too afraid to stop. I forgive you. I said, not loudly, not softly. You were 15. You didn't understand the consequences. You were wrong, but you were still a child. And children don't lie to destroy. They lie because they want to be seen. The whole table fell silent. Then I turned to my parents. But what about you? My voice dropped lower, each word slicing through the air like a razor. You were old enough to know better. Experienced enough to tell truth from lies. Wise enough to ask for proof before casting judgment. But you didn't need proof. All you needed was an excuse to keep up the illusion of the perfect family. And I was the sacrifice. My mother began to cry. My father bowed his head, hands clasped together like he was praying for something long gone. I continued, my hand clutching tightly in Alex's beneath the table. That day, when you slapped me, when you threw my clothes into the yard, when everyone turned their backs and not a single person asked, "Is this true?" You didn't just abandon your daughter. You killed the last bit of trust I had left in the world. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a photo. I placed it on the table. It was bruised, split-lipped, eyes dark and swollen. After the beating in the parking lot. This was me. 4 months after you kicked me out. This was the silence you sent me. No one could speak. The cafe went utterly still. I looked at them one more time, people who were once my entire world, now just strangers wrapped in the crumbling shell of a family that no longer existed. I didn't come here to ask for justice, I said, my voice strangely calm. Because I've already found my justice in peace, in love, in the child I'm carrying, and I don't need either of you to complete it. I stood up. Alex rose with me. Frank gave a silent nod, like a man acknowledging the strongest woman he had ever known. I looked at them one last time. I didn't come here for revenge. I came to end this. This ending was your choice, not mine. And then I turned and walked away. Behind me were 3 people crumbling to pieces. And ahead of me was a life with no cracks left for them to reach through. They followed me to the cafe's front door. My mother stumbled on the step, nearly falling, but still called out, "Anna, please, you're the only one who can help." I stopped. Not because of the plea, but because I felt something stir in my chest. Not anger, just emptiness. Like I was staring at an old version of myself on her knees, hands trembling in the cold, begging anyone, just anyone, to see her. I turned around. My parents stood there, stripped of every last shred of dignity. No longer the ones who had once placed the weight of a model family on my shoulders. Now, they were just two people, lost in the wreckage they'd created. I looked at them for a long while. Long enough for images to flash through my mind the first night sleeping in that equipment room, stomach clawing at itself, mouth so dry I drank from a fire hose. That rainy night on the bridge, thinking a single jump might be the only escape. The days I washed my clothes with public soap and dried them in the sun on rusted wire. They didn't know. They had never known. Because they had never asked. "I don't hate you," I said, my voice steady. "I used to, but not anymore. Because hatred is still a form of connection, and I've let go." My mother wept, her tears falling in streams. She stumbled closer, step by step. "We didn't know. We thought you were okay." I'm sorry, please." I shook my head. Gently, but firmly. "I don't wish suffering on you. I don't want you to lose your home, lose everything. But if pain is the only way for you to understand what I went through." I swallowed the tightness in my throat, then looked straight into their eyes, not as a child demanding justice, but as a grown woman facing the consequences. "Then let it happen." I walked away. No looking back. No hesitation. No resentment. Only footsteps steadier with every step as I moved toward the SUV waiting in the distance, where Alex leaned against the door, eyes locked on mine, like a silent reminder. "You don't have to walk alone anymore." The car door closed. The engine started a deep, steady hum. And for the first time in my life, I left without carrying any weight. No emotional debts left to repay. No family with the power to dim the light I had spent my youth fighting to reclaim. The ultrasound room glowed dimly with soft blue light, its warmth held together by whispers of joy not yet spoken. On the screen was our Babia life growing stronger with each passing day, a heartbeat echoing like a promise too sacred for words. "You don't have to fight alone anymore, Mom." Alex sat beside me, his hand wrapped tightly around mine as if pouring the whole world into my fingertips. He didn't speak. But the way he held my hand, the glisten in his eyesit told me everything. He felt it all. The old pain. The new beginning. The love that had never once faded. I leaned my head on his shoulder, and through the gentle rhythm of the ultrasound, I whispered, "We won't repeat the old mistakes. Our child will know real love." At the end of the hallway, Frank leaned against the white wall, arms folded, his gaze soft like a sunset. He nodded. No words were needed, I understood. He had witnessed every step of my journey from wreckage to rebirth. And today, that nod was the silent affirmation of a father who had truly been one. I used to believe I had to fight to hold on to family. But now I understand. Family isn't where you're born. It's where you are truly seen. I didn't choose blood. I chose the ones who chose to stay, even when the world walked away. If you've ever been hurt by the very people who were supposed to protect you, if you've ever felt pushed aside for simply speaking your truth, please know this. You are not alone. Share your story in the comments. I read every word. I see you. I believe you. And if this video touched something in your heart, click like to spread healing. Subscribe so you never miss the stories that deserve to be heard. And share this video with someone who needs to know that the truth always has a place, no matter how long it takes. And most importantly, learn to protect yourself. Because you deserve to be loved, to be believed, and to live a life no one can ever take from you again.